Move it, troopers! On the double! Fire!
Hey guys, this is Luke and Todd from the Scoundrels Cantina, and welcome to a one-of-a-kind episode of a Star Wars story. In this video, a special guest called Star Wars Elseworlds will be telling the story of Clone Commander Thorner, who was created by Star Wars fans that love expanding the Star Wars galaxy. Anyway, we leave it to our good friend Star Wars Elseworlds, so let's do it!
CC-7878, also known as Thorner, was a clone of Jango Fett and a commander within the Grand Army of the Republic. As a commander, Thorner was placed as the overseer of the 615th Legion, a siege, rescue, and ground recovery legion within a larger Republic military body known as the 22 Pathfinder Corps. Thorner can be described as a brave, caring, and competent military man, however could also be considered somewhat of a perfectionist and a workaholic. Throughout the war, he became increasingly distasteful of it, and his love for his men often outweighed his love for almost anything else, including the opinions of his Jedi superiors. While he came to respect the Jedi that were alongside him, he ultimately saw them as an unnecessary addition to the war, while being its primary cause as well, and blamed them for the fact that they could not keep one of their own from defecting, this one being Dooku. Over time, however, he began to see his general, Faros Jern, as a skilled warrior and honorable equal. This sense of equality was mutual, as in the eyes of the Jedi, Thorner was abnormally independent for a clone, as even hints of such independence could be seen prior to his ARC training, and of course increasing after it. His knack for perfectionism often came from his skill as an on-field tactician, considered one of the clone army's best improvisers. The earliest days of Thorner's military career came to fruition before the first Battle of Geonosis, where clone commanders underwent training from numerous skilled contracted bounty hunters. One of these trainers, a Mandalorian exile under the name of Bolin Eldar, would train several clone commanders frequently, using harsh drilled tactics and weighing odds against them. These unnecessarily rigorous training methods would eventually push Thorner to use illicit strategies in combat, building his creativity and on-field strategy for the later war to come, and even stealing Bolin's personal vibrosword to use in a combat simulation. While the Kaminoan trainers saw this with distaste and threatened to have Thorner decommissioned, Eldar took a particular interest in Thorner's training from this point and suggested that he be allowed to continue honing his sword proficiency under Bolin's guidance in one-on-one training sessions. Bolin would later mention 7878 used the sword similar to a thorn, through defensive means rather than offensive. A thorner, he would put it, and while it would take time to catch on, 7878 would eventually be referred to as Thorner by other clones, notably two of his batchmates, CC-1211, Dodge, and CC-1322, Trigg, and Bolin respectively. When the Clone Wars broke out, Thorner had of course left Kamino. During this time, he would lose contact with his pseudo-mentor, and due to this, when he heard of Bolin's untimely death, it was far too late. In his Phase 2 armor, Thorner would then pay homage to the Mandalorian by altering the helmet's visor to represent a more traditional Mandalorian T-shape. Throughout the Clone Wars, the 615th would go on countless missions under the command of Thorner, from the earliest Battle of Felucia to the final days of the assault on Megiddo. Several events would occur throughout the war, including early damaging of his inhibitor chip at the hands of an unsanctioned separatist bioweapons experiment, which increasingly meddled with Thorner's mind for the duration of the war. Thorner's relationship with his Jedi general, Faros Jern, would change throughout the war. Initially, Thorner saw the Jedi with respect and honorability. However, throughout the Battle of Felucia, this view would be warped, as while Faros was caring and held the lives of the clones under him with high regard, which was something Thorner commended, the commander found seeing the Jedi in battle and conjuring strategies not too indifferent to that of his own, put Thorner's self-perspective and in turn all clones to be equal to that of the Jedi. He came to regard Faros as a friend and dear colleague, however, would often question and even one-up his battle strategies, showing his skill as a commander was arguably on par, if not greater, than the Jedi's. While he would hold Faros with high esteem and generally respect his final orders, Thorner's overall perspective of the Jedi changed to an extremity of Faros' views. The war was completely useless. The Jedi were not fit for command and were merely peacekeepers. Thorner's faith in the Republic itself fanned the flames for this belief, and while he kept it to himself, he believed the Jedi should have been removed from commanding ranks and moved to voluntary support for worlds in distress. While Thorner's relationship with Pharos was upholding, his relationship with the Jedi commander and Padawan, Rylus Zal, was far from it. Numerous times throughout missions and skirmishes, Rylus would diverge from battle plans and take matters into his own hands. While Rylus had his own reasons for lacking caring clone troopers, that didn't shy Thorner away from the fact that Rylus inadvertently caused the death of several 615th troopers on Rishi. This event changed Thorner even further, as he would often not address the commander directly throughout the rest of the Clone Wars, and came to dislike the young Jedi. Come the rise of the Empire during Order 66, Thorner initially carried out the order, shooting his befriended Jedi General Pharos Jern in the back. Tragically, as Pharos turned to see his men fire upon him, he would continue to relay the order, and even track down the Padawan Rylus Zal as his mind wandered into further disgust as to what he'd done. However, just prior to the firing at Rylus, his subconscious grief overwhelmed the commander as he hesitated to fire and froze. He fell to the ground as his inhibitor chip actively malfunctioned inside his head. His fellow clones suspected the Jedi had injured him and quickly sedated him. Unfortunately for Thorner, the Jedi Purge would not be the final time he saw Rylus Zal, as years later, the Padawan's fate would be known to him. Mere months into the Empire's formation, Thorner would think and reflect heavily on what occurred to end the war. While his brothers believed their actions were just, he questioned it each second of each day. It was during these formative months of Imperial rule where the 615th were to be discreetly transferred from cleaning up Megiddo to maintaining public unrest on Rhodia. During this transit, Thorner would find himself at a breaking point, abandoning the Empire through an escape pod, leaving his former allegiances behind. Eventually landing on the distant world of Ikiva, Thorner began working as a hired thug for numerous minor crime groups, and soon enough becoming a full-time freighter pilot, traveling to many distant worlds. During this time, he would come into contact with a Trandoshan bounty hunter named Rexus, who Thorner had previously fought during the Clone Wars. Rexus was the first mate of another Mandalorian bounty hunter by the name of Thoron Ordo, and the two were able to point Thorner in the right direction. For some time, Thorner would then become a mercenary operating under the alias of Theo. While working as hired muscle on the planet of Akiva, Thorner was able to salvage and rebuild a reprogrammed BX commando droid, whom he nicknamed Fior. This would act as a coping method for his PTSD from the war, seeing a droid as a friend and not as a killing machine, a nail in the coffin that neither side won the war. Thorner, now known by the alias of Theo, alongside Fior, would continue to be a mercenary duo for some time before he came into contact with a former comrade and fellow war veteran, Clone Commander Trigg of the 30th Battalion, his batch brother, and by proxy, Zay Arlen, a surviving Jedi. Thorner and Fior would then leave their mercenary life behind to accompany Trigg and Zay, who had been in exile since the fall of the Republic, living a life of peace to avoid the Empire's reign. It was during this time that Thorner was finally informed of the inhibitor chips that the Kaminoans had placed in all clones, and after several years, his torment seemingly ended with its removal. This peace, however, would not last forever, as in 8 BBY, Trigg and another former clone commander named Dodge, who had been living with them, had sadly passed away in a final stand, allowing Zay's family to escape from the Empire. Thorner and Zay would later memorialize the two clones outside of the latter's farmstead, placing their helmets next to each other. This would ensue around a year-long wait, as the Empire inevitably would track down Zay, and in turn Thorner for assisting a surviving Jedi. When the Inquisitorius finally did track down Zay, it was now long since turned Rylus Zal was sent to deal with the Jedi. When Zol and several Purge troopers arrived to the ranch, where Thorner and the rest had been hiding up until recently, the tensions were quick to rise. Thorner and a reawakened Fior would combat the Purge troopers, while Zay would of course hold the line against the Inquisitor. It was during this fight that Thorner once more reflected heavily on his own life, lifting the helmet of a Purge trooper he had killed to find one of them was a surviving clone, possibly one of the final batches from Kamino enlisted into the Purge trooper corps. It was after this that Thorner looked to Zay and the Inquisitor, seeing the red blade besting the Jedi who had been force pushed into a wall. And what was seemingly an instinctive move, Thorner rushed to the dark side user with his vibro sword, only reaching several feet away before being lifted against his will, dropping the sword. The Inquisitor would laugh and remark to the clone on his familiarity, unsure as to where from. when in truth, Rylus was the Padawan commander within the 615th. Thorner, however, would not listen, as there was a plan in motion, one final plan. As the former Republic commander gritted his teeth, his palm overturned to reveal a thermal detonator in his hand, and the blast was instantaneous. As Thorner was knocked back, so was the Inquisitor, who was now disoriented for the remainder of his duel with Zay, weakening him to the point of being unable to recognize a fatal opening, allowing Zay to defeat the Red Blade. Thorner, however, suffered a fatal blow to his torso and would unfortunately pass away a few hours later. In his final moments, he gifted his vibro sword to Fior to be his own, laughing in disbelief that his legacy would be a battle droid, but happy and glad that he was able to right the wrongs of his actions years prior by saving a Jedi, giving his own life. You can check out the Fanon creators featured on this video in the description down below. Thor, Trigg, and Dodge have truly created a special Star Wars story and set of characters. I take great pride and joy in showcasing their Fanon creations and others on my platform, and in this case, Luke and Todd's. This is why I believe that Fanon creators are very underappreciated, so make sure to check them on their webpage and social media links. I want to give my thanks to Luke and Todd for giving me the opportunity to showcase a great Fanon Star Wars story, all thanks to the Clone Wars Ultimates crew. I remember watching this channel years ago, way before I even considered making a Star Wars channel, and I'd never thought that I would be making a video for the Scoundrels Cantina. This is pretty cool. I truly appreciate this opportunity, and with that, may the Force be with you all.
Anyway guys, this is it on the story of Clone Commander Thorner, and we really hope you enjoyed the hard work put into it by Star Wars Elseworlds and the Fanon creators that worked on bringing this character to life. If you want to watch more videos like this one, the link to Elseworlds' channel will be linked down below, as well as everything and everyone else that made this thing happen. We are honored to have had the opportunity to share a Star Wars Fanon story on our channel, as we ourselves have always said that we believe that most of the expanded universe and canon can fit together, which now also includes Fanon. After all, headcanon is what truly gives life to the galaxy far, far away for each and every one of us in its own unique way. Make sure to support Star Wars Elseworlds, and God bless you all. You Rebel Scum.
This party's over.